The abandoned jail. This is nowhere near as creepy as the other posts I've seen on here, but I figured it was my time to share. In my town, there used to be an abandoned prison. It was in the middle of the woods, and it wasn't the kind of place you just end up accidentally. Every once in a while, police would patrol around it, but for the most part, they just let the barbed wire fences do their job. Now, this wasn't a high security prison for serial killers or anything, but it held robbers and rapists until about 8 years prior to the incident. It was unsettling during the daytime, especially as so much of it had been left behind, as if the place was abandoned in a hurry. But it was downright creepy at night. Well, in high school, my friend Nick and I loved exploring. We went all over, including to the abandoned mental hospital that was only a couple miles from the jail. Growing up in the area, we knew that there was a small hole under the fence in one area, which was the only way to access the jail. One night, we made the normal trip under this hole and were walking around the area outside of the jail. We were moving as quietly as we could be, because as I said before, occasionally police would patrol the area. Eventually, we were pretty sure there was no police, so we began to get a little louder and turned on our flashlights. I should mention now that, other than the occasional policeman who parks his car outside of the fence, we had never seen another person anywhere near the jail, let alone inside of the fenced area. We were hesitant to enter the jail itself, first of all because of how scary it is at night, and second because it's a pain in the ass to get into the jail itself during the daytime, let alone at night. So instead, we kinda just walked around the outside for a while as we normally do, scaring ourselves for the fun of it. Anyways, eventually we start to work up the courage to go inside of the jail, so we make the long trip to the other side of it where we knew one entrance was. We're walking along the side of the jail where the cells were, which had these huge windows. These were so that from the outside, when the jail was in use, you could see all the inmates and what they were doing. As we're walking, out of nowhere, a light turns on from inside one of the cells that we were only a few feet away from. We can't really see anything inside, just the one beam of a flashlight, which first points upwards, then turns directly at us. At first, we just froze in terror. As I said before, we'd never seen anyone in there before. Who would be sitting inside of a cell, totally silent and in darkness, as a couple of teenage boys walked by outside. We couldn't imagine that it was a fellow thrill seeker like us. It was not the kind of place you just sit alone in the dark in. A homeless person? No, we didn't think he'd have a flashlight, and anyway, we assumed that cops must have looked through the inside during the day every once in a while. A police officer? Nope, there was no reason he would be sitting inside of the building, waiting while he would have known we were there for a long time. After a few seconds, we sprinted away as fast as we could. I didn't even turn around to see if we were being followed or anything. We just found the hole under the fence and got out of there. So, we wonder to this day who was sitting inside of an abandoned jail cell in the dark, presumably watching two teenage boys walk around outside, then waiting until they were only a few feet away to announce his presence by turning on a flashlight. I'd assume we'd never know the answer to that question, and I really don't want to know. We never went back at night, and the place is gone now. Not so abandoned house. I grew up in a small desert town in California. At the time of this event, we were living in a horrible trailer park. There were abandoned houses all over town that everyone loved to explore, and it was just something we did. There was one pretty close to the trailer park, and we went there a lot to play and look around. There was a fallen roof that was fun to climb over and a couple buildings to play in. Anyways, one day me and this other girl that lived in the trailer park decided to walk over there. We walked onto the property and we round a corner of the house when we realized that there was a car parked in the yard. It looks empty, so we decided to check it out. As we get closer, we realize that a man is sitting in the driver's seat, laying down and moving his arm. I didn't realize until later that he was masturbating. I freaked out when I saw him and turned to leave, but he had seen us and said hi, and my friend stopped me, saying she knew him. He started talking to her and it seemed like they knew each other. He asked where her and her family were living now, and she pointed to the trees that surrounded the trailer park. Suddenly, he asked us if we wanted to make $50. I backed up at that, my heart dropping into my stomach with fear. But my friend said yeah and asked how. He asked us to suck his cock, and before he fully finished his sentence, I was running back home. I stopped at the fence that outlined the yard and waited for my friend. I probably waited almost a full minute before I saw her, and to this day I have no idea why it took her so long. It wasn't a long run to where I was, and she should have already rounded the corner of the house if I was at the fence. She's getting closer, but I see him too. He started his car and is driving towards us. She catches up to me and we run down a dirt trail towards home, with him close behind. Luckily, there's a ditch that runs parallel to the trees, outlining the trailer park, and we jump in and run down that, where he can't follow. I look back to see him backing up and turning down the abandoned house's driveway, then getting on the highway. We stopped and caught our breath before running the rest of the way home. We called the cops, but nothing ever came of it. Abandoned hotel creep. This isn't my story. It's actually my boyfriend's mother who went through this. She told me this story after I mentioned some of the ones from here, so I thought this would be a good place to share. When she was younger, before she had my boyfriend, he's 26, she lived in an apartment that was above an insurance agency in a downtown area. The building had businesses on either side of it, with apartments above as well. Across the street was what used to be a hotel, but at the time had been abandoned for years, boarded up, closed up, broken windows, etc. I guess she used to do chores and just lounge around during the day naked or scantily clothed because in her head she wasn't on a first floor, so no one could see her. One day, she started randomly getting phone calls from someone she didn't know, telling her how nice she looked that day or something similarly creepy. He apparently would call once in a while, say things like that, and then hang up. This was before cell phones or caller ID, so there was no way to know where this person was calling from or who he was. This went on for a while, until one day, she got a call from him while her husband was out of the house. "I'm coming to see you," he said. "I know you're by yourself. I saw you." This obviously freaked her out, and since no one else was home, she called her uncle who was in town, hysterically asking him to come over to make sure this guy didn't do anything. At first, he thought she was crazy and didn't want to, but she wouldn't give up, so he caved and came over. About 10 minutes after her uncle got there was a knock on her door. The way she described the door was a school door, one with a large window in it that was easy to break into. Her uncle came out and started threatening the guy and cursing him out. The guy quickly turned around and ran back down the stairs, but as he turned around, she saw about 5 inches of a knife handle sticking out of his pocket. It turns out the guy had been one of her close friend's neighbors, and I guess had been stalking her for a while. He would go to the abandoned hotel across the street and watch her, then leave to go somewhere else and make his creepy phone calls. She never did find out how big the knife was or what he intended to do with it. So, creepy neighbor who lurked in an abandoned hotel to stalk someone, let's not ever meet. The not-so-abandoned carnival. Hope this fits here. After my first semester of university, at the beginning of May, I decided to reward myself by getting tickets for a band I wanted to see. They weren't playing in my hometown, unfortunately, and the nearest venue they were playing was in a small town 6 hours away by train. I had a friend who attended university in the town who agreed to let me stay with her, so I figured it would be fine to go up. I had never been to this town before, but having lived in larger cities my entire life, I often associate small town with safety. I declined my friend's offer to drive me to the concert, considering she was studying for finals and I enjoy a good walk. The town was divided by a river, and to cross that river you had to go over one bridge, then walk through a park on an island, then cross a second bridge to get back into town. To get to the first bridge from my friend's university, you had to walk down a nature trail. All of this was perfectly lovely as I did it at sunset. I had just emerged from my first winter in a rather harsh environment that I had grown up in, and the whole nature trail park combo was filled with joggers and children playing and squirrels and everything that I had missed. This is only noteworthy in that I felt completely at ease with my route, but I was pretty distracted and didn't pay a whole lot of attention to exactly which path I had taken. The concert didn't let out until probably slight past midnight. I got to the first bridge, crossed, and proceeded across the island to the second bridge. It was a nice night out and I was actually sort of enjoying myself in the warm spring air. That is, until I got to a hill I didn't remember walking over on the way there. I stopped at the base of it, feeling that something was off, and eventually attributing it to the fact that I had somehow forgone an entire hill. How funny, I thought, as I walked up the mystery hill. All of my thoughts ceased as I got to the top and found myself looking down the path into an empty carnival, and beyond that, the second bridge. Bit of context. I'm a 5'7", 120-pound female, trained as a circus performer pretty much my entire life. This means that whatever extra weight I carry is pretty much all muscle. And also that I don't have any sort of fear of carnivals, or clowns or anything like that. But walking over a hill I didn't remember to see an entire carnival I didn't remember definitely set me on edge. But I didn't really see any way around it. Plus the bridge was right there, and besides, the carnival looked abandoned. So I start off down the other side of the hill into the creepy carnival, maintaining a quick pace, definitely on high alert. I kept my focus mainly on the bridge I was aiming for. I was most of the way through when I saw the people. I saw them from far enough away that I didn't jump, but I did stop dead in my tracks. They seemed pretty normal looking by their clothes, and I was too far away to see their faces. They were sitting in whatever was available, lemonade stands, immobile roller coasters, covered picnic tables. I didn't really know what to do about any of it at all, and I'm pretty sure there were much, much better options available. But in the moment, feeling I had to do something, I started walking towards them. And as I did, I made eye contact with the very first one of them I saw, and held it as I walked through them. The man I had chosen to look at, I remember very vividly. Looked a lot like I imagined death would look like. A gaunt, drawn-out face with no expression of any kind, sunken eyes that followed me as the rest of his body stayed still. From what I could tell, the rest did the same. I was terrified out of my wits, and for some reason, making eye contact with the zombie of a man was the only thing that I felt was keeping me safe. I never broke eye contact until I reached the second bridge. So far as to opt to walk backwards down the trail, I turned and crossed the bridge at a sprint, and someone shouted behind me, which only prompted me to run faster. Now, I mentioned that the route from the university to the bridge was a nature trail. That means that it had no lights on it and was as black as the void, trees covering up the moon and making it impossible to see anything. I didn't care. I ran down the trail, tripping over who knows what, anything to put distance between me and the creepy carnival people. Eventually, I reached a patch of light at the edge of the university and stopped. There wasn't any noise anymore, except for crickets and my own frantic breathing. If any had followed me, they hadn't done so for long. I managed to gather myself together enough and remember that I did in fact have a cell phone, which, at that point, I used to call my friend to have her meet me at a well-lit spot on campus, populated by studying students. I told her what happened, and her eyes got really wide. As it turned out, unbeknownst to me, there were two trails through the park on the island, a north and a south one. I was taking the north one on the way there and accidentally took the south one on the way back. She told me that people never, ever passed through the carnival at night, as it was where the local meth addicts would hang out. They were unpredictable at best, and at their worst, well, muggings were the least of it. I had gotten off extremely lucky. So, everything ended up being explainable. But somehow that made it worse. I didn't sleep well that night, and when my friend offered to drive me to the train station across the river the following evening, I accepted. I was the creep. To preface this, I think it's important to know that I'm a small 20-year-old girl, so not exactly someone who looks manly or threatening. Anyways, I go to a small, pretty college campus that has a lot of secret places. As a photographer, I like to explore all of the attics, roofs, and locked doors the buildings have to offer. However, my favorite place is this abandoned lot buried in the woods. It used to be home to a large abandoned monastery that was later torn down because someone was fatally injured while exploring it. I like to go out on Sunday mornings to have some quiet time to myself and maybe take a few pictures. There's a small house at the beginning of the path where an elderly couple lives. I've always liked going there the most in cold weather, so I'm usually wearing my big LL Bean parka with some sort of a hat and gloves. Because part of the lot are thickly covered with weeds and things, I wear sweatpants over my jeans and work boots. One day, when it wasn't so cold, I went out with a light sweater on. I waved to the elderly couple as I passed their house and kept walking into the woods. I did a few laps around the property and was taking pictures when I noticed something weird in my viewfinder. The elderly man was watching me with binoculars. I immediately started walking back and thought it was the best to confront him, hoping that it would be a misunderstanding. It was. He explained that he was watching out for me because he was worried I would encounter the hobo that lived in the woods. He explained that they saw him walking around often, and they thought he was deranged. I guess word had spread, and the surrounding neighborhood families had forbidden their kids to go into the woods alone because of the infamous hobo. I told him that I go there often and had never seen anyone, but he insisted that they saw him all the time. I asked him for a description: short, tan jacket, sweatpants, boots. Yeah, I thought it was best not to explain that I was the hobo.